Live from our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists, this is Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
The tropics, how we like them in June. Nothing expected from this wave near Africa, but we all know that storms form fast, and that's why we've got our A-list hackers in the Stream Center today. We're talking our top hurricane hacks, the tricks that'll make your neighbors go, man, I wish I had thought of that. It's straight ahead here on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric. Yes, an all-star team of hackers in the Stream Center today, and joining us from WGNO, Chief Meteorologist Hank Allen, back on the program on Season 5 of Tracking the Tropics. Welcome back, folks, with meteorologists Rebecca Barry and Amanda Holly as well. I'm JB Buno. We're going to talk about hurricane hacks, and we want to hear your hurricane hacks in the Facebook Live comment section. Comment at us. What's your number one trick for getting through a storm, whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane? Let us know in the comment section. But before we get to our hurricane hacks and the tricks that you ought to know from our three experts on screen, here's Amanda and Rebecca to review exactly what we're looking at here on Tropical Satellite.
Yeah, it's really just an area of low pressure that's spinning in the northeastern section of the Atlantic, is very far away. The National Hurricane Center was kind of watching this. This is all the way in the northeastern section of the Atlantic, and the National Hurricane Center was just keeping an eye on it for possible subtropical development. But we just looked, they updated it, and they're not looking at any possible development now over the next few days. It's moving away anyway. Yeah. But it's just a reminder.
I like how comically small that little yellow area is. Like, we need that?
It's tiny.
We don't need it. We don't need it.
It's inconsequential. Hank, this is what we like. This is exactly what we like.
Yeah, it's you don't really expect a whole lot in June. We saw the one named Storm Arlene, of course, that didn't do anything. The one off the coast of Charleston, obviously, I think impacted a lot more people than Arlene did. But that's the deal with these early season storms. They're just sort of arbitrary to me. I think the Hurricane Center likes to classify them if they look halfway decent. For whatever reason, they'll tell you they don't, but it just seems like a lot of times we get that classification. But look, there's your main development points here coming up through the next month. You got to look at the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean. And really, guys, I think that's the theme all year here. Everybody wants to talk about this El Nino, the wind shear and all that, but that impacts, storms way on the Atlantic so much more than it does the Gulf and the Caribbean. And so I don't know. We'll see what happens this year. Personally, I think they're undershooting the estimates a little bit, or maybe not. I hate the long range forecast anyway, but I think you have a chance to see maybe more severity out of this season than people are just sort of talking about because of this whole El Nino thing. Because as we know, the past few years, a lot of these storms that have been impacting the U.S. have developed in the Caribbean and in the Gulf of Mexico. And the Hurricane Center is already talking about how warm these waters are going to be as we go through the summer, above normal, even though they're normally, super warm anyway. And so that El Nino impact for those storms way on the Atlantic is definitely going to diminish those. But a lot of times those aren't the ones that impact us, especially here along the Gulf Coast. So I think everybody really needs to pay attention to this season.
Hank joining us from New Orleans, Louisiana. Of course, Rebecca and Amanda here with us in the Stream Center in Tampa, Florida. We know that storms can form really quickly, folks, especially during the peak months of hurricane season. And that's why we're talking hurricane hacks today, because out of nowhere, you can have a storm form, and then everyone's rushing to their Publix or their local grocery store, getting all the supplies, and then before you know it, you find yourself unprepared. So, Amanda, Rebecca, walk us through some of this is the tricks of the trade now, the number one hurricane hacks that people should know now, early in hurricane season.
And I think it's fun because we've accumulated these through the years and we learned them from you guys. So if you have a hurricane hack that we're not talking about, please drop it in the comments. Now you do have to use one of our hashtags, #HeyRebecca, #HeyAmanda, for us to be able to see and display your comment. But we want to hear from you too, because this is how we accumulated these, because when a storm's actually threatening our area, we're at work, we're not at home.
Yeah. We have to get through, and our husbands take care.
Yep.
Take care of the house.
Sorry, man. I think the first part of your preparation really starts with, should I stay or should I go? Do you need to evacuate? A lot of people have moved to the state. A lot of people have moved to areas that are impacted by hurricanes that they previously maybe didn't have that experience. The evacuation zones change from year to year as they get more information and things develop. So I think the first real decision is, am I in an evacuation zone? You can find out on your county website. And are you going to evacuate or not?
Yeah, and you don't have to be in an evacuation zone to decide if you want to evacuate. Maybe you're not in a sturdy structure and it's a big storm coming at you. So even if you're not in an evacuation zone, that question still applies to you and you should still evaluate it. If the answer is no, that's great. Then you get to have some we'll have some hurricane hacks to help you get through the storm and ride it out at home. But if you do decide to evacuate, you know, there are hacks that we have to give you as well. So if you decide you're going, you have to decide where to. Are you going to go to an emergency shelter, which the county provides? Is it pet friendly? Do you have pets? You never want to leave your pets behind. And then what do you bring? Obviously, some sort of entertainment for you, for the kids, maybe even for the pets. You sat in Hillsborough County's emergency management meeting the other day, and they kind of walked you through some of those shelter conditions. And you might decide that you don't want to go to a shelter, and that's perfectly fine. Yeah. You still got to bring some stuff with you, though.
Yes. And so what they emphasized when we were at the Hillsborough County Emergency Operations Center for people coming to shelters is this is designed to keep you alive. It's not a 5-star resort. You have to bring your own bedding. You're not going to have that much dedicated space to yourself. They showed us the space that they designate per family, and it's pretty tight if you have all of the sleeping bags or cots rolled out. And of course, you wouldn't need that during the day. You can use that space to play with the kids and that sort of thing. And then they told us a heartbreaking story that because a gentleman during the last hurricane didn't realize that he wasn't going to be able to be with his pet, he turned around and went back home away from the shelter. And so they wanted to show us, look, your pets are safe, but because of allergy concerns and other concerns, they can't let you have your pet with you in the same room. There's an entire different room, an area dedicated to pets. They have to stay in their kennels for the most part until you go take them out. But you also need to bring the pet food with it, any medications your pet takes, maybe a little blanket or a bed to make your pet feel more comfortable, and a leash so that you can walk them and take them out. You're going to have to care for your pet, but you can't be in the same room with your pet. And they wanted to make that clear just to set those expectations out there so that everyone knows what to expect.
Right. And you can go visit them, just not with them 24/7 there.
Hank, any thoughts as we make it through the first few hurricane hacks here?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with the pet aspect. I tell people if you're looking at hotels around the region here in case the storm's coming here, definitely call ahead and make sure they accept pets if you do have to go there. Obviously, plan the route that you're going to try to go. You know, when it comes to evacuating, and look, I always think, and I know it's expensive, but I always think if you don't have a generator, and even that a lot of times is a false sense of security because a tree can still fall on your house. But a lot of people choose to ride it out, at least here locally, because the whole home generator has become such a big deal. It'll power your house when the power goes out and that sort of thing. But you know, even if the storm is sort of middle of the road, you're not going to get a ton of damage. You know, do you really want to be without power for a week? So that's the thing you have to think about, I think, going into these storms. Try to save up some money. I know everything's expensive nowadays, but try to, you know, save up enough to where you can maybe evacuate to a hotel for 2 or 3 days because, you know, the power goes out. It's 95 degrees during the day behind these storms in the middle of August. It's humid at night. It's very uncomfortable to be around in those conditions. And so try to save up some money ahead of time to pay for your evacuation. Keep the cash on hand because if power goes out, you know, ATMs aren't working. I think another good hack is to get those prescriptions filled ahead of time. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe you evacuate somewhere out of town and they can't get a hold of your pharmacy locally to get those medications and those records ahead of time. So if a storm's coming, or at least, you know, if it looks like there could be an issue, trying to get those medicines filled, a week's supply to take with you. And I also like to tell people to take documents with them. I know everything's electronic nowadays, but you know, I still don't rely on, you know, people in a scrum with 50,000 people displaced being able to find your insurance policy when they really need it. Right. So, you know, any important documents like a birth certificate, social security card, I would rather have those with me. I think you put those in a Ziploc bag. If you don't have one of those portable safes, just put them in a Ziploc bag, something that's going to protect them from getting wet, throw them in the trunk of the car, whatever. You know, try to keep as much of that important stuff with you as you can.
Rebecca, Amanda?
Well, one of the last things on the list that you came up with, you know, we talk about bedding, but bringing some earplugs and eye masks, it's a big thing. Those shelters, you know, sometimes they don't turn the lights all the way down because they, you know, have to leave a little bit of light for people to walk around. But earplugs and an eye mask will help you get a much better night's sleep in there because it is going to be a little loud.
Somebody's going to snore.
Yes, and that.
Somebody's always the one. There's always the one.
And if it's probably going to be me if I have a sleep mask and earplugs in.
Because you're going to be the one sleeping.
And then one last thing with shelters is most counties do offer transportation for those that may be disabled or not have a reliable mode of transportation, but that does require pre-registration. So if you think you might have trouble getting to a shelter, you should reach out now at the beginning of the season when nothing is busy in terms of the tropics and go ahead and get that arranged.
Good point. Just knowing all this stuff now, it might not seem like the most exciting subject matter, but actually having these conversations now and talking about it, it's important.
It is important, but also, after this episode, go do these things, right? Don't just put it in your back pocket and wait a couple weeks, and then a couple weeks goes by, and then a couple months goes by, and then the storm's here. So, make some time this weekend to do those things. Put it on your to-do list.
What's next here? What else are we looking at as far as, and a reminder, folks, as Rebecca noted, we really want to hear your hurricane hacks. And I really like, we're going to take this one really quickly just to show that we're paying attention to our comment section on our meteorologist Q&A powered by Bose Electric. I like this one. This one's coming in from Michelle on the WFLA Facebook page. Yeah, use a hashtag or give us a comment or a question, and we'll put it up on screen like this. And Michelle says, my hack is to trust the meteorologists at News Channel 8. You know what? I think for the first time this season, we can hit the applause button for Michelle and say, thank you for that. We really appreciate it. But yes, it might seem like, that she's pandering a little bit, just a smidge, just to, but at the same time, staying in the know with your local weather team, whether you're in Louisiana and you're following Hank Allen and the great team at WGNO, or you're here at WFLA and you're following Rebecca and Amanda and the Max Fender 8 weather team, staying in the know is really important, Rebecca.
It is. And there's a lot of information out there. And especially in the age of social media, maybe some people are spreading information that might not be 100% something that is accurate, especially for your area. And that's why your local meteorologists are so important in these situations. So trusted information isn't the absolute ultimate hurricane hack. But what we're going to focus on right now, and I think what people find the most usage out of, is hurricane hacks if you are staying. So let's talk about water, because we all have seen those pictures of empty shelves at Publix or Walmart, no cases of water. I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but you do not have to exclusively drink store-bought bottled water during a hurricane. You can fill up containers or pitchers or old bottles that you already have with tap water and use that for your water that you need for when potentially you may not have the use of water, or the water lines may need to be run because of some damage or something like that. The other part of this is what I didn't understand, because I grew up in the country as a kid, and we were on well water. If you lose power on well water, you lose water. That doesn't happen on city water. I remember I was in college and the power went out and everyone was still taking a shower in the dorms. And I was like, what is this sorcery? But so
now you might have to boil that water in some capacity to be able to drink it, but you still have water if you're on city water.
Yes. And so the adage of filling your tub up isn't absolutely necessary for some people. Like, it would be very difficult for the area that I live in right now to actually lose water just based on the infrastructure. And so we don't fill our tub up now, because your tub is not for drinking water unless you have one of those bladders or something. You just can't get your tub clean enough for that to be a good idea. Now, some people do have specialty bladders or big plastic containers that they put in their tub and fill up with water, and that stays sanitary, and that's fine. But the purpose of filling your tub up is to use that water to be able to flush your toilet while the power is out, but that's not really a concern unless you're on well water. And so we try to not fill our tub up, because then if we don't end up using it, now we're adding an entire tub full of water to an already pretty flooded infrastructure at a pretty bad time.
And I will say, I have these bags. We're going to do the show and tell, JB. These bags, this is a 2.6 gallon bag. I got these from Amazon. We actually got these for a trip to go to the Everglades. And you fill it up with water and you put a little lid on it, and it holds water. You can put them in your freezer. And if you do lose power in your freezer, this will help keep your freezer colder a little bit longer. But these are super cheap. You can order them now and just literally put them away. They fold up nice, and you can fill them up when a storm is coming and you have water from your faucet.
Yes. And now this is my husband's territory, because I'm, at work most of the time. But he starts about 4 or 5 days before the potential storm impact, and he takes gallon Ziploc bags, and he doesn't fill them all the way full.
Right, because that expands.
But he fills them about halfway so that it's flat, and then he lays them flat in the freezer and lets them freeze flat. And then he'll do another one and do another one. And so what he's doing is he's filling up the space in our freezer that would be air with ice. And so when the power does go out, that freezer is going to stay colder longer because that ice is going to take a lot longer to lose that temperature than air would. And then as we lose power, he takes 1 or 2 of those frozen bags out of the freezer and puts them in the refrigerator. Now that keeps the temperature in the refrigerator lower and keeps our food safe for days. And then once it does melt, we've got fresh water to drink too. So that's our number one water hack at the Dingman household over here.
The second water hack, though, is one's Rebecca's too. It's a really good one. So I did a little experiment for you. It actually involves you doing this several days prior as well. You want to put a cup of water in your freezer and let it freeze. And then before you leave, if you have to leave your house and you're gone for days at a time, put a quarter on top of that frozen ice that's in your freezer. And if you get back and that quarter's still on top, well, you know that your freezer did not lose power and nothing defrosted. But if you get back and the quarters are on the bottom or anywhere in between, you know that your freezer defrosted a little bit and you should probably throw all of that food away.
Don't you hate that? I can't stand it when you come back, you realize you've lost power, and it's like, man, all these frozen vegetables, all these things that I had, the frozen pizza, Hank, that's the one that hurts me the most. I got to throw away this frozen
that pizza.
No, man, the frozen pizza is where it's at. Hank, we were talking before the stream. You have, of course, your kids at home, and I know that being a meteorologist during a storm, you're at the station, you're informing your viewers in Louisiana, making sure that they are, weather aware. But what do you do in the Allen household as far as making sure everybody is ready to go in advance of a storm making its way towards Louisiana?
Yeah, it's tough, certainly to evacuate the kids, because you got to just tell the wife, well, all right, get on out there and I'll see you in a few days. And she doesn't like that very much, to say the least. At least they're a little older now. A lot of people talk about the mental aspect for kids, and that I haven't experienced that with mine. I think they're young enough, they still think it's just a vacation and they get to go somewhere and stay in a hotel. I think once you get past about the age of 8 or 9, they really start to understand what's going on and understand the damage and that sort of thing. So older kids, I certainly think you need to, maybe going into the season, prepare them a little bit more. Say, hey, we're coming into hurricane season. There's a chance that a storm comes this way. There's a chance that we may have to, you don't even have to say evacuate. You say there's a chance we may have to go on a vacation a little bit, sooner than we were planning, something like that. Just give them a little heads up, because I know there's a lot of psychology out there about, kids being upset about evacuation and that sort of thing. I personally think, kids are a lot more smart and resilient than we give them credit for. And I think if you sort of give them a heads up, build them up a little bit ahead of time for that, they'll be better off for it. If you do have to go somewhere, you get 6 and under, though. I mean, it's just a free for all for them. To me, it's just a vacation. But, I think definitely you talk about going to the grocery store ahead of time. I mean, we're already in early June, so maybe a little bit each week, because again, I know the price of everything is so steep now and so many people are struggling to cover the cost of all this stuff. But if you do it a little by little, I think each week, instead of trying to just get a whole big batch of supplies at one time, so when you make that Walmart or Publix run, pick up a couple packs of crackers, and then the next week, maybe you pick up some pouches, and then the next week, maybe you get some peanut butter and tuna, stuff that is not going to go bad, that you can take for the kids in the car and maybe on a trip that they can eat, and some little snacks here and there. And nobody's more of a sugar and nutrition Nazi than me, but maybe you got to lower the requirements a little bit in these types of scenarios so you can buy some more of those fun snacks for them and that sort of thing. But I think you do that ahead of time, so you're not just stuck trying to do that all at one time if you have to load them up.
Yeah, and I am not a parent yet. I'll be a parent later on this year, and I know from taking enough notes, by the way, there's one very, very obvious hurricane hack is if your kids are on the iPad, if they're at the tablet age, charge the iPad.
Bring the charger.
Yeah, bring the charger.
Bring the backup battery.
Car charger.
Backup batteries. Make sure that they have something to do. What else do we have here, Rebecca and Amanda, as far as hurricane hacks?
And so through hurricane coverage in the past couple of years, I had the opportunity to talk to retail stores about what items sold out before a hurricane that weren't on hurricane preparation lists. And rope was the number one, because people are trying to secure pool furniture. They're trying to secure outdoor things. Rope sells out before a storm. Wow. Tub stoppers sell out. If you do need to fill your tub stoppers sell out. Buckets are a hot item. You're going to need a bucket at some point, whether it's hopefully not a leak from your roof or just being able to move that water from the tub to the back of your toilet. tie down materials, bungee cords, those straps that ratchet down and tie down things, those types of things, buckets, and then duct tape and Flex Seal tape. I did a segment with a couple of people that they knew water was going to come in their sliding glass door. It happened during, bad storms that were just normal. So they absolutely knew water was going to come in their sliding glass door. And so they taped it with Flex Seal, that tape that's waterproof. And so they couldn't go in and out of that door, but then they sent me a picture. The water's up, but it's not coming in.
Wow.
And so for particularly flood prone areas, there's Flex Seal paint and Flex Seal tape. If you needed to
spray
secure.
that you can get.
Yep.
Might be a pain to get off, but at least you don't have water in your house.
If you've got a dry house, it can be as much of a pain as it needs to be.
No, that's a really important one. But I love how this graphic is simple enough to just put bucket, because I feel like I'm always looking for that bucket in the garage and I can never find it.
It's a good bucket.
Get
really
multiple good buckets that will take care of you.
Good bucket's hard to come by.
Yeah, man, you got to find the good bucket, not the one that breaks after just a few uses.
That's right.
Let's go to some of the comments that are coming in. How about this one from Sue on the WFLA Facebook page, keeping your voicemail up to date, letting folks know where you are and how you're doing. So this one comes down to communication. And guys, we were talking a little bit about batteries earlier, but having those mobile batteries, being able to charge, there's no guarantee that you'll have cell service in the event of a storm hitting your neighborhood, but look at that, right on cue. Amanda's got the next graphic, but electronics, those are pretty important, Amanda.
So electronics, very important, right? And keeping those batteries charged. I actually had this conversation with my mom 2 weeks ago because weather radios are really great, but my mom lives in an area where she experienced Hurricane Ian. She was on the outskirts in Sarasota County, but basically, the weather hadn't even started yet, and a lightning strike or something hit the cell tower. And she doesn't live in an area with very good cell service, so typically she relies on her Wi-Fi. Well, the power went out shortly after, so she didn't have cell service, and she really didn't have a way to get information. So I said, okay, you have your weather radio, that's great. So you get alerts, but you should also have an FM or an AM radio that is battery powered. So a lot of times when we're in wall-to-wall coverage, I know that we simulcast our coverage to some of the radio stations across the area. And just in general, a lot of the radio stations broadcast some sort of coverage in this local area, if in your local area, wherever a hurricane is going to be hitting. So that's one way you can stay up to date, because she didn't, besides me texting her when I could, she really didn't have a way to get any information on what was currently happening besides, the occasional update from the weather radio. So an FM or an AM radio to at least be able to listen to updates from your local radio station or a TV station that's simulcasting is pretty important.
Absolutely. And my experience with weather radios is you really need to sit down and read all the directions.
Yes.
Because
they're not that simple.
They're not simple, and you're going to get so annoyed by it if you don't sit down and read all those directions and program it to get alerts on exactly what you want and not get alerts for every time there's a marine warning. It's a very gritty thing, and if you just gave it an hour and programmed it, you're going to save yourself a lot of frustration.
We hear stories. I don't know if you guys have heard stories too, but after a storm hits, and it's been in multiple television markets that I have worked in, I hear stories of there's always the one family on the block that was really prepared, right? You know what I'm talking about? Like, oh man, they had all the the tricks, and they had water, and they had the right food supplies, they had a weather radio, they had things to stay, and then there's always that one house on the block. This whole episode is about making sure that there's not just one house on that block, but maybe two or three.
Yeah.
Because what will happen during storms, especially bad ones, in the aftermath, people will rally towards those families, but then it can get a little bit, look, you want to be prepared yourself and not have to depend on others in the aftermath of a storm. And while there's always going to be shelters open and there's going to be resources that become available, it's really important to stay in the know with your local EOC.
They're going to be packed. It's going to be busy.
And you're going to be in line, and you'll maybe have the kids, and everyone's going to be freaking out. And
it's just a stressful situation in general, right? I mean, we experienced this last year with Hurricane Ian. Hank, you experienced this, with multiple storms, in 1 year. And it's just a stressful situation, even if you didn't have anything happen to your home. So it's better to be prepared now, have everything that you need.
Let's get to this.
So much more stressful when you're not prepared.
Yes.
Right.
I
Yes.
always
That's
think of the
right.
phrase, I don't even know whose quote it is, but chance favors the prepared man. I mean, if you wait till the last minute to do this kind of stuff, that frankly is very easy to do. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're somebody that boards up windows, get your plywood cut now
Mhm.
instead of waiting on the big run at the store. Get those external battery chargers like you're talking about, that radio. Think about generator safety. If you have one of those portable generators, make sure you know to keep it away from your house, because really around here over the past couple of years, you think about Laura, the big one a few years ago, you think about Ida here a couple years ago as well. Really, most of the deaths from these storms actually occurred after the storm with improper generator use. People just had them too close to their house, carbon monoxide poisoning, that sort of thing. Know what you're doing if you got a generator, if you got one of these portable ones. It has to be, 15 to 20 feet away from the house, that sort of thing. But, you're going to have a lot less problems with this kind of stuff if you get prepared now, get those supplies, and get all these things that we're talking about done ahead of time, so that when a storm comes, it's just such a stressful situation and so much of a rush. And I think Rebecca brought up a great point earlier that we talk about a lot on TV here as well. So many people have moved into these areas. I mean, you just look at the national population trends. People have moved in, especially into Florida. Obviously, you guys know that. Certain parishes here in Louisiana, counties in Mississippi that can be impacted by this, and not just the ones right along the coast, but farther inland that may be coming from areas that they've never even seen a hurricane in their life. And it's so important to review these tips to kind of get yourself familiar with where you are, what counties or parishes are bordering you. If a storm surge warning is issued for the next county over, think, wait, is there a creek or a little river that's by me that could overflow and flood my house? Just so many things to think about if you've never been through this before. And now's the time to do it. The time to do it isn't 3 days out from a landfall.
Yeah, and you were joking earlier about your husbands, right? I'm talking to the dads out there, man. Get on a Saturday or Sunday coming up, mow the lawn, get your chores done, and then go to Home Depot or Lowe's. Go to one of those stores. You can get most of this done in an afternoon. I mean, or a morning before lunchtime. I mean,
You mentioned mow the
before
lawn.
kickoff.
Trim the trees around your house too. Do a little trimming, just to kind of tidy everything up so that those kinds of things you're not worried about as that storm's approaching. The last thing you want to be doing before a storm is coming is trimming a large branch that's over your roof because you're worried about it falling down. Like, that's not the thing that you want to be worried about as a storm's coming in.
Jim Anderson on the WFLA Facebook page, #KJB. You didn't need to fill your tub to flush your toilet. Just collect rain runoff in a bucket and use that to flush your toilets. 5-gallon buckets work best. You guys were talking a little bit about this earlier.
Yeah. But
That's
you need
absolutely-
multiple 5-gallon buckets.
Yes.
That's right. That's
Yes.
right.
You wouldn't want to be confined to one. And also, if it came down to you being without power and water for days on end, you don't have to use the most clean water you've ever seen to flush your toilet. If you could go get lake water or river water, or try to filter out whatever debris is in it. But even water out of a ditch, like, you're just looking to move the water through the toilet.
Charles Miller on the WMBB Facebook page from the Florida Panhandle, getting a solar or dynamo-powered radio.
Ooh.
The
I don't know what dynamo
solar
is.
powered radio would be nice. I've never heard of a dynamo radio.
Yeah,
though.
we'll have
Googling
to,
it for us now.
Yeah, we'll have to look. Charles, we appreciate the recommendation. We'll try to. I'm of course familiar with a solar radio.
They make a lot of those hand crank radios too, where you can just crank them.
Yeah.
And they are powered for a short time by that as well.
Yeah, I think that's what a dynamo is.
Oh.
It's the hand crank, according to the Google.
And of course, I'm sorry. Say that again.
I said according to the Google, that the dynamo is the hand cranked radio.
Right there you go. Perfect. Just
And this is for all the dog and cat
This is a
people out there,
great hack.
because my dog is pickier than I am, and if it's wet, he is not going outside. And my yard was wet for about 5 days straight after one hurricane, and he was just miserable. And so you can buy a kiddie pool, and you have to buy it before the storm because this hack is getting out. And so people know about this, and they sell out of kiddie pools. And so you can fill it with kitty litter if you want, or some rocks or gravel on the bottom, and then put some sod over it to emulate a area for your pet to more comfortably use the bathroom. We keep ours in the garage when this happens so that it doesn't stink up the house, but it's not in the rain. And so this is my number one hack to keep the dog a little happier when it's so
and get
miserable.
them to go on it a little beforehand so they're used to it, right? So like let them try it out, you know, a couple days before the storm, and that way their scent is on it too.
Yes, absolutely. So kiddie pools always sell
Yeah,
out right
no, that's
before a big storm.
amazing.
Yeah.
Last call for any hacks, anything that we missed. Commenters, if you're joining us on Facebook Live or elsewhere, you want to comment at us. Hank, any other hacks, anything that comes to mind? Amanda has the graphic here for after the storm. What do you got?
That's kind of what we were talking about in terms of the generator. I mean, we've covered a ton of stuff. This is all great stuff. I think if people really just sit down and review these lists that we're talking about and go do this over the next couple of weeks, you're going to be so much more well prepared. For those people that do have a home generator, I know a lot of times around here we've run into problems over the past few years where, you know, if the power is out and these whole home generators are hooked up to a natural gas supply, I mean, they are running non-stop, and they don't have an infinite lifespan on these parts that are in them. So you got to think about, you know, buying extra oil filters for these, buying extra quarts of oil for these, because the gas supply is coming in naturally, but there are so many of these parts that you have to change, you know, maybe every 5 or 10 hours, depending on what the brand is. And so if you don't have these parts put in there, it's going to be as bad as not having a generator at all. So I think that's something critical to think of if you are somebody with one of the whole home generators. If you, as I mentioned, if you use the portable generator, get the extension cord, make sure you keep it far enough away from your house to where you're not dealing with that risk of carbon monoxide and that sort of thing. And, you know, in general, just think about your house, your layout. And I really think more times than not, even if it's not a Cat 5 coming at you, so many of these areas that certainly I live in here in Southeast Louisiana, and I'm sure a lot of times where you guys are as well. I mean, power outages are almost guaranteed.
Yeah.
So if you've got kids, or if you've got pets, or if you've got some elderly family members, or even yourself, think about what's it going to be like to sit in this house or in this yard for the next 5 days with no services, no power, no groceries open, something like that. It's just not a pleasant scenario. So I know times are tough and everything costs so much, but I really urge everybody to just try to find a way to save up maybe a little emergency fund to get yourself at least to a hotel for a couple of nights in the middle of that, even if it's after the storm. Even if you make it through, you ride it out, it's 95 degrees beyond that, go down the road somewhere a couple of days later and check into a hotel room. Because it's just not fun to sit around with no power for just, you know, a week or 2 weeks at a time.
I'll ask you guys. I'll ask the three of you guys a question, because for me, let's just say I'm just the average consumer watching, right? If I make a hurricane kit, if you will, and it has a lot of the things that we've been talking about on this particular episode, how many hurricane seasons is that going to last you? I mean, are we talking about several hurricane seasons that, you know, that you'll be covered?
It depends on what it is. Your
Yeah.
snacks, obviously, probably not going to make it.
Cycle those out.
Right.
But I mean, a generator should last you years if you upkeep it. I mean, I was also going to say with the generator, you know, a lot of people had generators here last year. If you're going into this hurricane season, make sure you're looking at that generator. Did you leave fuel in it? If so, do you need to put some stable in it to kind of get it going again? Do you need to empty it completely? If you just bought a generator, typically you have to run it through, you know, an initial cycle. You have to run it for an hour, run it for 2 hours to get it going. So do those things ahead of time too, so you know how that works. But seriously, if you used a generator last year and you might have left fuel in it, make sure you're keeping an eye on that and doing what you need to do. If you need to treat it, if there's water in it, if it's separated, because that won't work the same going into this year if you need it again.
It's a perfect.
Get a service technician out. I mean, all these guys, you know, now's the time to do it. Again, you don't want to try to do it. It's like getting your chimney clean when there's a freeze coming.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not going to happen. So get these guys out now. Get the service guy out if you're somebody that needs that you can't check yourself, to come out, check all the parts and everything like Amanda's talking about, and make sure that's ready to go. And yeah, I mean, you know, you keep a bottle of water for 2 or 3 years. You can keep a can of tuna for 2 or 3 years. So not all this stuff you have to buy every single year, but it's so much better to have it now. And, you know, you get to the end of the summer, you get to October, and you just have a snack fest or something at your house, you know, but it's just so much better to have it ahead of time and not need it than be stuck with something coming down the pike and be like, man, I really wish I'd gotten some of those supplies.
We've been talking so much about generators on this episode. It's a perfect segue for us for the first time on season 5 of Tracking the Tropics, to talk about our new sponsor, Bose Electric. They do generators, and they have generators across multiple locations here in Florida. They are just one example of a company that will be able to help you in advance of a storm. As Hank was just noting, Bose Electric, they have standby generator systems, and they have more than 50 years of experience in it. So, and that's why this is such a great partnership as well with our team here at Tracking the Tropics and Bose Electric, because we can actually talk about meaningful ways that people can prepare for storms, and our sponsor can actually help with that. So just a great opportunity to give them a shout out and say it's just great to have them on board with our mission here at WFLA to provide interactive coverage both before, during, and after storms in Florida and beyond. I'd really like to thank our entire crew here for sharing their hurricane hacks. I'll go to one more comment before we begin to wrap up this episode. Steve on the WFLA Facebook page saying, if you can afford them, I have an APC battery backup power system for my modem and router computer monitor. They're semi-expensive, but well worth it. They can power all electronic items. Another great buy. You can find them Best Buy, Amazon, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Lowe's. I mean, these are also great units as well.
Yes, and just to talk about after the storm, it's typically the deadliest time of a hurricane. More people get injured by improperly using their generator, to where they get carbon monoxide poisoning, to electric shocks, to hurting themselves with chainsaws,
falling off a ladder, falling down, off the roof, things like that. So you got to use that extra caution.
I put gas cans on this graphic twice by accident, but there's a gas can problem. So I'm old, so I'm used to the gas cans of my childhood, where when you poured it, it came out.
It was normal. They're not like
well,
that
these new ones are tough.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
they're
so-
like, things that you have to pull, and they don't always open, and there's
right.
filters. Yes.
It's much, much slower now. And so don't buy the biggest gas can that you can. Buy the biggest gas can you can hold up for 20
Right.
minutes
With
while it
liquid in
very
it, yeah.
slowly leaks out. And so siphons typically sell out after a storm also, which can be dangerous. But from people trying to move gas from these larger cans that they can't physically hold up for that long to whatever appliance they're trying to fuel.
I'm the guy that you see reading like the instructions for how to properly fill it and trying to that guy. That's me, because I get lost with the gas cans.
I will say that the more expensive gas cans may be worth it in some cases. With the way that they've had to change gas cans, the more expensive ones do tend to be a little easier.
Good to know. Good to note. I'd like to thank everybody here for joining us. Really quickly, Hank, we're running out of time. Hank Allen has been on multiple seasons of Tracking the Tropics as we enter and now have begun season 5 of Tracking the Tropics. Hank, thank you. Hit the applause button for WGNO's chief meteorologist, Hank Allen. And Hank, what are some of the other things that you're going to be watching for in the months ahead for your viewers in Louisiana?
Yeah, well, first off, you guys know I always love coming on doing these shows with you. I think it's great. It's a lot of information, and I have a lot of fun doing these, hopefully without a pending storm. But, I mean, that's really is. I mentioned kind of off the top, I know everybody's talking about El Nino, and yes, that's such a big impact for those storms way out in the Atlantic. I showed a graphic the other day, 29 hurricanes within 60 miles of New Orleans on record, going back to the 1850s, and only 6 of them formed east of, the island chain. We always look at the Antilles way out there in the Atlantic. 6 out of 29 hurricanes. So if you're along the Gulf Coast, anywhere from Texas to Florida, please get prepared now. Don't let your guard down. The waters are going to be super hot this time of year, and the El Nino impact is just lesser in our region. And so if anything tries to develop with these warm waters, we're really going to have to keep an eye on it. And so I think it's really worth getting all this stuff done now. And the one other thing I always talk about, get the flood insurance, call your insurance agent, make sure all that's checked up and ready to go, because a lot of that stuff has a 30-day window to take effect. So you can't, be a week out from a storm and try to change your insurance policy and have that work. So go ahead and get that done now, along with all the other supplies. That's just a simple phone call to your agent and, get all this taken care of.
A big thank you to Hank. A big thank you to Amanda and Rebecca. And before we wrap up this edition of Tracking the Tropics, something new that we can let our audience know about, and this is very new for season 5 of Tracking the Tropics, a very special hello to anybody listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Yeah, we are growing here in your hurricane headquarters in Tampa Bay, Florida. And so if anybody out there is listening right now on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, obviously be able to see some of the graphics here, but still this information is great, and we're trying to distribute it on as many platforms as possible. Some of these great weather conversations that we have with some of the best meteorologists in the country, that's really good information. And we know that especially weather geeks are really going to appreciate some of the upcoming episodes that we're going to have of Tracking the Tropics powered by Bose Electric. So if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we want to hear from you. Shoot us a little note on the Tracking the Tropics email. I'll give this out. This is trackingthetropics@WFLA.com. Again, that's trackingthetropics@WFLA.com. We would love to hear from you because that is very new for us here with the Max Defender 8 weather team as part of Nexstar Nation. Again, a huge thank you to Hank Allen, WGNO Chief Meteorologist. Give him a follow on social media. Watch him, of course, in New Orleans. And, of course, you can find the Max Defender 8 weather team with Rebecca Barry, Amanda Holly, our entire team here at WFLA, your NBC station here in Tampa Bay, Florida. I'm JB Buna. Really important to note that you can always go to trackingthetropics.tv for storm updates, the latest tracking models, and, as we talked about on this episode, hurricane preparedness. Really great information, and of course all of our episodes and articles you can find there. Shout out to Dylan Abond, who's our new digital content producer, who's heading that up here for us at WFLA. For our entire team at WFLA and at Nexstar Nation, we really appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
Find Tracking the Tropics on these platforms. And for storm updates, the latest models, and helpful resources, visit trackingthetropics.tv.